These disasters killed more people than some wars, and no one talks about them. So let's change that. These are the top 5 deadliest disasters you've probably never heard of. Number 5, Mount Tambora. Tambora was once a towering volcano, over 4,300 meters high, making it one of the tallest peaks in the region at the time. I say was because while it still does exist, today it's quite a bit smaller, thanks to one of the most violent eruptions in recorded history. Located on the island of Sumbawa in what is now Indonesia, in April of 1815 it decided that it was done sitting quietly and erupted with devastating force. This wasn't your average eruption. It came in at a VEI of 7, and considering that scale only goes up to 8, that should tell you how insanely powerful it was. In fact, the explosion was around 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. The initial eruption killed around 10,000 people due to pyroclastic flows and falling ash. Tambora released so much ash into the atmosphere that it triggered a volcanic winter. The following year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed across much of the northern hemisphere, leading to widespread hunger, social unrest, and general misery. Number 4, the 2004 Indian Ocean Earthquake and Tsunami. On December 26th in 2004, a massive undersea megathrust earthquake measuring around 9.3 in magnitude ruptured off the coast of Sumatra. To put that into perspective, a 9.3 magnitude quake releases energy equivalent to about 32 billion tons of TNT, roughly 10,000 times the explosive force of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That insane amount of energy triggered a catastrophic tsunami that tore through the Indian Ocean at breakneck speeds, obliterating coastal communities in 14 different countries. Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand were hit the hardest. In many places, there was no warning, just the ocean vanishing and then roaring back as a towering wall of water sweeping away everything in its path. Some waves reached heights of over 100 feet, and in some areas it looked like the ocean disappeared and then returned with monstrous force. Number 3. The 1976 Tangshan Earthquake. On July 28th in 1976, Tangshan, a very industrious city located in the Hebei province of China, was home to roughly 1 million people. At around 3 a.m. while the city slept, tragedy struck. A 7.6 magnitude earthquake shook the region. Despite only lasting 23 seconds, the devastation was overwhelming and the city was all but destroyed. There was no warning. Everyone went to bed thinking everything was fine, and many were crushed in their homes as they slept. Over 90% of the buildings were completely destroyed. The official death toll was declared at 250,000, but some survivors in later reports suggest that the number could have been as high as 650,000. 16 hours later, a powerful 7.0 magnitude aftershock hit, destroying temporary shelters and wiping out many rescue teams. So many people were killed that mass graves had to be dug. The morgue simply couldn't hold everyone. Unfortunately, rescue efforts were hampered by the political turmoil at the time. Chairman Mao was dying, and the leadership was in disarray. The Chinese government initially attempted to suppress the news, declaring the situation under control. Even Chinese citizens were unaware of the true scope of the disaster until weeks or even months later. This likely stemmed from the fact that a year earlier, the State Seismological Bureau had predicted a major earthquake in the region, but their warnings were ignored, and the office was even shut down temporarily. Admitting the truth would have meant admitting that better preparation could have saved countless lives. Number 2, the 1970 Bhola Cyclone. On November 12, 1970, a Category 3 tropical cyclone hit what was then East Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh. While it definitely had impact on a lot of places, it took the biggest toll on Bhola Island and the Ganges Delta. When it made landfall, it had wind speeds of over 115 miles per hour, and that's not even really what made it deadly. It was the massive 20 to 30 foot storm surge that crashed in on a low-lying, densely populated area. Most of the populace at the time lived in simple huts, which were washed away in a matter of seconds. The storm hit at around 10 p.m. that night, visibility was low, and most people were sleeping, so it took nearly everyone by surprise. There was no time for preparation, and on top of that, Villagers received little to no communication from the government about the incoming storm. The result? Absolute devastation. Entire villages were wiped off the map. Some islands lost up to 90% of their population. In the chaos that followed, bodies clogged rivers and littered shorelines. Survivors were left to dig mass graves with whatever tools they could find, if they had the strength left to dig at all. And the disaster didn't end with the storm. With crops destroyed and livestock drowned and fresh water contaminated, famine and disease followed. Relief was slow, painfully slow, and many of those who survived the winds did not survive the weeks that followed. But the cyclone didn't just reshape the land, it reshaped history. The Pakistani government's slow, disorganized response outraged the people of East Pakistan. Just 1 month later, in the national elections, their frustrations exploded at the ballot box. The storm helped fuel political unrest that ultimately sparked the Bangladesh Liberation War, and within a year, a new nation was born. Number 1. The 1931 China floods. The China floods are what I consider to be the deadliest string of natural disasters that occurred in the 20th century. These floods happened in 1931, primarily from June to November. The affected areas spanned central and eastern China, with a focus on the Yangtze River Basin, Yellow River Basin, and Huai River Basin. Provinces like Hubei, Hunan, Anhui, Jiangxi, and Jiangsu, and Henan were hit the hardest. The disaster was triggered by a combination of extreme weather and environmental degradation. Record snowmelt in the spring raised river levels early, followed by unrelenting rains and 7 typhoons during July and August alone. The rivers just couldn't take it. They burst their banks, flooding entire cities and transforming the lowlands into a giant island sea. The Yangtze River in particular expanded over 60 miles wide in some regions. Whole towns were swallowed, and parts of cities like Wuhan remained underwater for months. Most of the population lived in floodplains, with very little protection. Deforestation, poor land management, and outdated levees meant that once the waters rose, there was no stopping them. Millions were forced to flee, crops were destroyed, drinking water was contaminated, and the humanitarian crisis escalated rapidly. Diseases like typhoid and cholera swept through the refugee populations, and famine took hold. Soon after, conservative death estimates placed the toll around 1 million, but some sources claim it may have reached up to 4 million, accounting for drowning, starvation, and disease. Around 180 million people were directly affected. That's nearly half of China's population at the time. Government response was limited. The nationalist regime lacked the resources to manage a disaster of this scale. With international attention focused on the global depression, little help came from abroad. Relief efforts were disorganized and in many rural areas, non-existent. The 1931 floods were more than just a natural disaster. They were a national trauma. For those who lived through it, it meant the loss of everything. Homes, family members, farmland, and even entire communities were erased. In some areas, people survived by climbing onto rooftops and eating tree bark or weeds to stay alive. Others died waiting for help that never came. This wasn't a single flash flood or a hurricane. It was months of unrelenting devastation that reshaped the land, decimated populations, and plunged China even deeper into instability during the already fragile period. It remains the deadliest natural disaster in human history. If you stayed this long, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and comment down below. What might you want to see in the next video? And you don't have to subscribe, but if you don't, you're probably gay, and I don't make the rules.